Hello, my name's Tim, and my subject is theology, so religious studies, philosophy. I also move off into English and various other things. I have decided that I'm going to try and keep up with your various A-level and GCSE schedules and produce a series of lessons and videos which I hope will help you in your schoolwork over the next year. I want to help plug the gaps that you may have experienced over the last year because of being at school and because of being at home, actually. And also, there may be times now when you have to study at home. So I want to be a resource. Now, look, please follow me, subscribe to my channel, and then you will see all these videos as they pop up. As I say, I'm going to cover religious studies, A-level and GCSE, philosophy, A-level, and some English literature and language. So look out for all these lessons. They're going to be a little bit slapped together, so maybe the image quality will not be spectacular. I will do whatever I can, and I will try and add some drawings and bits and pieces to brighten up the general presentation. But we're looking at little lessons which will be about 20 minutes long. Okay, so and fast forward to the bits you want. If there's something specifically you want me to do, leave a note below, please, and I will try. I will try to do what you ask me to do. Okay, let's get started. So if you are going to be doing religious studies, probably one of the first lessons you are going to be doing will be on the argument from design for the existence of God. It's called the teleological argument, and it's the simplest of the various arguments that are used to philosophically prove that God exists. I'm not completely convinced that they all work, particularly if you take the starting point that God doesn't exist. If, on the other hand, you think God does exist, then actually these arguments help to defend, help to support your belief. We can start with a quotation from John Paul II, who was the Catholic Pope during the 1980s. Indeed, I've got a signed photograph of him. But John Paul II said, faith and reason should be mutually supportive. So we shouldn't find that we've got an adversarial conflict between religion and science. A very interesting point, because we often assume that is the conflict. But reason can itself be misleading, and faith can also lead to some very crazy beliefs. Like, for example, David Icke's belief that the Queen is a reptile, or there's a person called Linus who talks about the Great Pumpkin. You can think of the flat Earth belief, or more historically, you can think of the way that the Church clung to the Ptolemaic system of the universe, which said the Earth was the centre of the universe and everything revolved around that. That led to house arrest for Galileo, one of the great scientists, and it eventually led, more recently, to the Pope apologising for that. So at best, reason, natural theology supports our faith. And this is certainly a principle that goes all the way back to the Middle Ages, and to particularly to Thomas Aquinas. If you haven't come across Thomas Aquinas yet, here's a picture of Thomas Aquinas. He was a very fat friar. He belonged to the Dominican order, and he was so fat, I believe, that the Dominicans in his friary had to carve a semicircle in the dining table so that he could dine with them at leisure. These arguments, Aquinas thought there were 5, I think there's 6, and the most exciting one is one that Aquinas doesn't like. It's called the ontological argument. These could be used as arguments or a defense against atheism. Now let's begin with somebody that you know, because it's always good to start with something you know. Stephen Fry, the great Stephen Fry. In an interview a few years ago on Irish television with on a programme hosted by a man called Gay Byrne, Stephen Fry talks about bone cancer in children, and he talks about an eye worm that burrows into a child's eye in Africa, and that this is pernicious. If there is a God, why would a God design such horrors? I entirely agree. However, you have to recognise that Stephen Fry, unfortunately for Stephen Fry, Stephen Fry is so wonderful, but on this occasion, he's not really done all the research he should have done. He's drawing on something that David Attenborough had said casually, and it's very unclear what eye worm he's talking about. There's a thing called the black fly. There's the lower eye worm, and there's a wonderful thing. I've got to get this right because I made a note. Onchocerca voculus, or vovoculus, which is a river worm, and it causes river blindness, and indeed 37 million people have been infected with this. It doesn't necessarily lead to death. It is extraordinarily uncomfortable and bad, but anyway, it's what you hear is a polemical statement. It's designed to elicit an emotional response, and it does, and Stephen Fry is very good. Also, we're going to come across these when we look at the argument about evil. So it's not really pertinent to today's lesson. Today's lesson is on the teleological argument. But we have to think about the biblical defense of nastiness in creation, and we see that particularly in the book of Job. We also see it more recently in the wonderful books by C.S. Lewis, which we might call the Narnia defense. If you remember in The Magician's Nephew, Diggory's mother is dying, probably from cancer. And when he tells Aslan about this, Aslan cries great shining tears. He doesn't, though he could, perform a miracle. He doesn't. He is sympathetic. He is empathetic. He shares Diggory's sadness. So that again is another way of explaining evil in the universe, disorder, chaos in the universe, and yet at the same time advancing an idea that that the universe will point to a good God. Finally, in this preamble, don't forget Tennyson's poem In Memoriam. Tennyson was writing after Darwin, and he says, "We trusted God was love indeed, and love creation's final law, though nature red in tooth and claw, with ravin shrieked against his creed." Do remember that line. Nature red in tooth and claw. Nature is not always warm and cuddly. So the teleological argument, we get the name from Greek. Telos, meaning purpose, end. And there's two main people who advance the teleological argument. The first is our fat friend Aquinas, the Dominican friar, the man who had the table specially doctored for him. Now Aquinas said all natural occurrences show evidence of design. This suggests beings with purpose. There are things which still show purpose but cannot think, like a stone, for example. So there is an intelligent being that is directing all things. That is God. Now, Aquinas uses an analogy. An analogy is a way of drawing a comparison between two things. Aquinas uses the analogy of the archer. The archer is the intelligent being that fires the arrow. The arrow is inanimate, unintelligent. But if I were to fire my arrow at somebody, bang, ow, ooh, the arrow does the harm, not specifically me, though I am responsible. The second person who you need to know about is William Paley, who died in 1809. That is relevant. In 1802, he published a book called Natural Theology. And he talks about two things. He talks about design qua purpose, design about a goal, and design qua regularity, design about order. Now, a lot has been made about his goal image because, again, he uses an analogy. He says, imagine I'm walking on a heath and I stumble across a stone. I can't work out how that stone got there. I can't really draw any inferences about that stone. But let's imagine that I'm walking on the heath and I stumble across a watch. That watch must have been dropped by somebody. That watch shows evidence of design. That watch is very complicated. All the little cogs, because remember, we're in the days of my grandfather clock, all the little cogs work together to tell the time. Take one out and the whole thing collapses. He also gives an image of an eye. An eye enables a person to see. It has a specific purpose. So neither the watch nor the eye are accidental. They are moving towards a particular goal. Richard Swinburne is somebody that you may have come across. If you haven't come across him so far, you will in the course of the next 2 years. Richard Swinburne talks about regularities of co-presence or spatial order. He also talks about regularities of succession or temporal order. When he's doing that, he's talking about design qua regularity in terms of William Paley's division between purpose and regularity. When Paley is talking about regularity, it's the less famous of his analogies or arguments, and he draws. He makes reference to the laws of motion, the laws of Isaac Newton. Things are predictable. Things operate in the same way every time. We can predict and we can understand what is going on. So there are a number of things which work with great complexity towards a given purpose. And there are a number of things that seem very complex, maybe accidental, but we can predict how they're going to behave. The sun is going to come up tomorrow morning. What is it? As Orphan Annie says, the sun will come up tomorrow. Anyway, so Richard Swinburne, back to Richard Swinburne, says the universe might so naturally have been chaotic, but it is not. It is very orderly. But it might look consistent and not actually be orderly. What if the order in the universe were an accident? It might, for example, be a victim of the infinite monkey theorem. You know, if you get a lot of monkeys together, we think it's almost an impossibility that they're going to produce the works of Shakespeare, but it's not an absolute impossibility. If you throw a pile of books in the air, please don't try this, if you throw a pile of books in the air, there is just the slightest chance they will land in alphabetical order. Order is not necessarily intentional, and chaos can produce order. There's also this extraordinary theory, a psychological theory, which started at the beginning of the 20th century, called Gestalt psychology. And the people who are behind that were saying that actually the human mind wants to see order. We want to see patterns in things. You remember the film A Beautiful Mind? Some of that is there. The second point, these are sort of criticisms really. Just because I understand something does not make it right. Think again of the Ptolemaic universe. Or you can think of astrology. These are subjects. The Ptolemaic system, I can think of so many books in the Middle Ages written about the Ptolemaic system with great purpose and force. Or of astrology, which was taught in universities. You know, it's not just the stuff of Harry Potter and the back pages of the Daily Mail. A lot of paper has been wasted on these theories, and as far as I know, they are today pretty well worthless. So just because I can understand something, just because I can write about something, doesn't make it correct. And also, another interesting criticism, Aquinas and Paley are both geared up to saying, look, I see order. Order implies thought. Order implies an intelligent being. And there does seem to be order in our universe. But when we look at a subatomic level, when we look at subatomic physics, we're looking at a system based on chaos and not order. Is the God of William Paley, is the God of Thomas Aquinas responsible for that sort of chaos? Paley's watch argument, as I say, is the most famous, designed qua purpose. But don't get so overwhelmed by the watch theory that you forget about design qua regularity and the Newton laws. Newton wrote in 1687 or something. But remember, that's the less famous of the William Paley arguments, but it's not necessarily unimportant. William Paley says, why is the eye so significant? Because it points towards God. God wants us to believe in him as an intelligent being. God wants us to aspire to be like him. That's very Thomas Aquinas, by the way, as well. Everyone could see, if God so chose, everyone could see miraculously. We wouldn't need eyes. If God had designed us like that, we wouldn't need eyes. But God wants humans to understand him and to see his intelligence within the natural world. Let's get back to our criticisms of the teleological argument and specifically of Paley and Aquinas. And we have to be very, very careful in the way that we use these criticisms. The main critic of these arguments really is Hume. Now look at the dates. William Paley lived in the 19th century. Hume lived before him. Paley knew of Hume's criticisms of the teleological argument. The teleological argument is older than Paley. In fact, the teleological argument can be traced all the way back to Cicero. Cicero, who lived from 106 to 43 BC. And Cicero talks about reason that pervades all nature, and this is what we imitate. Reason that pervades all nature. The divine power is the principle of reason that pervades all nature. And his analogy, by the way, is a sundial. So if you want to take it all the way back, we can see the first example of the teleological argument before Christ, before the Common Era. So be very careful in the way you structure your criticisms. Examiners are always referring to the fact that there will be some student who says that Hume objected to Paley. Hume could not object to Paley. Hume was long dead. Now let's look at Hume's objections to the teleological argument. The first one, and there's really three objections. And I don't have a lot of time, so you're going to have to look some of these up for yourself. So if there is design, there must be a designer. That's the teleological argument in its smallest form. Hume will say, one, this is an anthropic error. We are transferring our human-centered beliefs to the divinity. We want to see everything in human terms. Anthropos is the Greek word for human. And so the first problem is that our analogy is possibly wrong, and we're imposing our human ideas onto the universe. If I have a mother, it doesn't mean that the universe has a mother. Secondly, the world, the universe, is actually imperfect. We can think here, again, of Stephen Fry's eye worm. Thirdly, there is nothing that shows that even if the teleological argument is correct, that there is a single designer. There could have been an entire school, university, country of designer gods. They could each be repairing each other's work and evolving. In fact, what Hume is talking about here is a very early idea of evolution, even before Darwin gets there in the 19th century. So you've got all these gods, each trying to better creation. And this creation that we're living in now may not be the final result. The universe may be random, and it may be erroneous. It may be a trial. This may be something that is going to be thrown away. That's Hume, David Hume. Very important. And the second critic would be John Stuart Mill. And John Stuart Mill was a 19th century philosopher who inherits the ideas of utilitarianism and then develops them. He writes a book, The Nature and Utility of Religion. And he says that nature is guilty of serious crime and goes unpunished for incompetent or cruel creation. We're back again to Stephen Fry's eye worm. Thirdly, we can think of we can think of Darwin. I would like to think of a man called Steve Jones, who's a geneticist, and he says that our creation is, and here's the quotation, a series of successful mistakes. Darwin lived in 1850, by the way. The expression survival of the fittest just in case you want to be really clever and sort of QI-ish, back to Stephen Fry, the expression survival of the fittest does not belong to Darwin. It was actually coined by a man about 7 years earlier, by a man called Spencer in 1850. And finally, we come to Richard Dawkins. Now, Richard Dawkins wrote a book in 1986 called The Blind Watchmaker. He would talk about the illusion of design. And he talks particularly about random mutations and variations that lead to the genetic accident of DNA. So, what have we got here? We've got an inductive, a posteriori argument, which is trying to prove the existence of God, the teleological argument. If you are writing an essay about the teleological argument, you need to make sure that you've got most of these facts at your fingertips. Then a really clever essay could attack the teleological argument or support the teleological argument by looking at some of the assumptions that are made. I mean, for example, what is a proof? How much do you need to do before you have proven something? The fifth argument of Thomas Aquinas, the teleological argument, is called a proof. Do you really think it's a proof? Or does it just sort of edge you towards accepting what you already accept? Remember, Thomas Aquinas was a friar. Thomas Aquinas was already part of the church. He wasn't starting from a position where he was in opposition to religion. He was advancing an argument to support a belief he already had. Often today, somebody will come to your door and say, hey, I'd like to talk about God, and then advance the teleological argument on the assumption that you are going to move from your belief in no God to a belief in God. Now, maybe that is not using the teleological argument in the way that it was originally intended. So be very careful about that. Now, I'm going to tie up here. I think that's about 20 minutes. And any comments, please leave them below. And if you want to, if you want me to give you more details and more information about any aspect of the teleological argument, please leave your requests below in the comments. And subscribe to my channel. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Next time we're going to go on to the much more exciting argument, the ontological argument, which is probably my favourite argument for the proof of the existence of God. And it's also, why is it important for you if you are studying theology or studying religious studies or studying philosophy? It's important because this is the first chance that you will have to deal with abstract thought, absolutely abstract thought. So I'd said that the teleological argument is an a posteriori argument, but the ontological argument is a priori. So we look forward to that, and I'll see you in a few days' time. Thank you very much.